somebody not really understanding. Yeah. I love art.
Superintendent Griffin. Eric Harrigan with RBC Capital Markets. So the reason that we're here today is that the school district was in the market this morning selling $40 million of general obligation bonds and $11 million of education technology notes. Those education technology notes were split into $6 million of taxable bonds and $5 million of tax-exempt bonds. I'll keep my comments here pretty high level, but of course I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. So in total, the district was in the market for $51 million. The district was very well received by investors. We got a total of about $140 million of orders from investors. And because of that, the underwriting team of Stifel was able to lower interest rates across various maturities, across the general obligation bonds. And so the true interest cost on the general obligation bonds was a 3.48%. For the taxable 6 million ETN, the true interest cost was 4.65%, and the TIC for the tax-exempt bonds was 2.99%. I will note that for the general obligation bonds,
We'll get started with our regular meeting soon. We're just waiting to make sure we can go live on our broadcast for our public meeting. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We are being recorded and continuing to troubleshoot our live streaming efforts. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and salute to the New Mexico flag in English and in Spanish, as well as our acknowledgement of tribal land. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el simbología de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. And next, the acknowledgement of tribal land. Thank you. We acknowledge that our Board of Education meeting is taking place on occupied indigenous land. We acknowledge the Tesuque Pueblo lands and other tribal lands on which we stand. We honor these people past, present, and future. We acknowledge the history and ongoing colonization of where we are sitting right now in New Mexico and in our country. We acknowledge our own place in the story of colonization. Thank you very much. We'll move on to approval of the agenda. Any changes needed? Okay, just to note that item C on our action items is an invitation to bid on miscellaneous construction tools, supplies, and hardware that we'll be approving. It's not actually a proposal. There was a typo.
President. Through Principal Valerie Apodaca's unique and student-centered approach to scheduling. It meets 4 times a week through the built-in Avid/RTI block. The program serves as both a musical ensemble and a cultural home for students, building musicianship, leadership, confidence, and pride through the traditions of mariachi music and community performance. The ensemble also serves as a pilot program that its directors hope can become a model for future mariachi education throughout the district. As mariachi programs continue to grow nationwide in response to an increasing Hispanic student population, Santa Fe's rich cultural history places the city in a unique position to help lead this movement in music education. Above all, Mariachi Nino Otero reflects a belief that music education can honor culture, strengthen community, and provide students with meaningful opportunities to see themselves represented through the arts. I give you Mariachi Nino Otero.
choice for us to continue her legacy. So I just want to say that I am really, really grateful to you for allowing us to continue teaching and providing music, mariachi music to our kids, our students. You know, they have different opportunities to do different things, but culturally, in the area that we're at, and the students that we have, I think this is an excellent, excellent opportunity. I would encourage you to continue the program. The program kind of dwindles down at the middle school, and I think it's important for it to continue out to the high school and beyond. Locally, there are a bunch of groups, there are professional mariachi groups. They're always looking for musicians, and one of the best places to be able to come out of our own schools. So again, my name is Martin Sen. I'm pretty familiar with the process that goes on up here. I'm the vice chair of San Miguel County Commissioners, so I kind of know what the process is, what you guys do. So it's been an honor to be able to co-teach with Mr. Alcocer. We've been able to do some amazing things together, learn together, share together, and be able to make some wonderful music. I'd like for Mr. Alcocer to say a few words. Thank you.
You've already heard many of my words, all of that writing about the program and the general idea of what we're going for. So there's a lot of the idea. So I just again want to thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been a really wonderful experience. I came to Santa Fe specifically to do this program and to be around it. So thank you to Christine Gonzalez for her leadership and her tenacity in getting me out here to go and help the program. I love this position. Thank you very much.
Cariño.
Thank you so much to the Mariachi Ensemble from Nino Otero, and thank you to the families for being here and lending your students to us for the evening. Board meetings would probably always be better if we start with a couple songs from a mariachi ensemble. You. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to public forum. Ms. Melton.
Hello. All right, so I'm going to read the rules of the Santa Fe Public Schools Board of Education Public Forum. Public forum includes online or virtual participation as needed, as well as in-person comments when the board holds in-person meetings. Please listen and speak with respect. No uncivil conduct will be permitted. Please do not discuss any specific student who is not your own. No sharing of time. Self-monitor and observe the 3-minute time limit. You will receive a 30-second warning when your time is almost up. Public commentary and dialogue are allowed only during public forum, not throughout the meeting. Please search for answers on common ground. You may speak on any topic, whether it is on the agenda or not. Your input will be taken into consideration. Please be advised that the board may discuss your issue during the meeting, but by law, the board cannot take any action on items that are not on the agenda. Please do not discuss employee matters which may result in disciplinary action. Instead, notify the employee supervisor, the Human Resources Department, or the superintendent. We have nobody in the virtual room signed up for a public forum, but we have 2 people signed up here to speak. Is Cody Hansen ready?
Before they start the timer on me, because I'm hitting right up on 3 minutes. Good evening, my name is Kobe Hansen, and I realize that the nature of this forum is not a question and answer period, but I do have a question that I hope someone can answer. What are the consequences for a district employee when they report instances of harassment of a student by a teacher? I'll tell you what they are. Having your responsibilities reassigned with 2 weeks left in the school year. Having students that you poured your heart and soul into for 8.5 months be told that they can no longer speak to you. Being asked to attend possible disciplinary meetings with a union representative. Being told that you're no longer allowed in your work location, even though you have 2 children attending that school. All because you had the audacity to follow district guidelines. From your own employee handbook, should an employee encounter such a prohibited conduct, or should an employee have knowledge of such prohibited conduct happening to another individual, it must, and you guys capitalized it, must be reported in accordance with the reporting procedures below listed in your handbook. Ironically, the next line describes when punishment should happen. Let's see what your handbook says. Anyone who is made aware of discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, and/or retaliation and fails to report it to these procedures may be subject to disciplinary action up to and including suspension and/or termination or discharge. Page 23 of your handbook, not mine, yours, goes on to say, after a complaint is received, a district representative will promptly conduct an investigation appropriate to the circumstances. Discussions will be held with the complainant and witnesses. What I can say is that no investigatory discussions have been held with the complainants. And finally, from page 23, again, from your handbook, and this is really important, the district will not tolerate retaliation against an individual who, in good faith, reports a violation or perceived violation of these policies. It goes on to say that anyone who engages in retaliation against an individual who has in good faith reported a violation of the laws and/or our policies, whether or not one agrees with the facts reported, is subject to discipline up to and including termination of discharge for those who retaliate. The 2 individuals that are retaliating against my wife and my daughter are Janice Ulabadi, Kearney Principal, and Megan Goddard, HR Specialist. Since I originally wrote this yesterday, today there have been other actions of retaliation towards my wife and daughter. Their SFPS email has been shut down, and an email sent to members in here have been removed from that email by Megan Goddard. She has also emailed my wife and daughter to bring their technology and badges to 610 Alta Vista. And this is all because they follow district policy for the safety of a student. My question is, what are Janice and Megan trying to cover up? Here's their technology and badges.
Thank you. Next, we have Matthew Pacheco signed up.
Good evening, Madam President Noble, Madam Vice President Bose, Superintendent Dr. Griffin, and members of the board, and everyone else here. Normally, I would come up here and give a talk about cell phones or nicotine addiction or keeping Milagro a middle school, but I want this to be a positive and kind of share some of the things that has happened at Milagro. Sorry, I'm Matthew Pacheco, 7th grade science teacher at Milagro Middle School. We are doing really great things, and I know you saw that whenever we had Milagro in here, like there were teachers and we were feeling we've continued to do that. And I just want to share, give a shout out to my principal, Ms. Baca, Mr. Van, our dean, Mr. V, all the employees that I get to work with. And I want to thank Dr. Griffin for seeing the need for another science teacher. And we finally have a science teacher. She applied in February. She actually showed up on Monday. And so she's been shadowing me. And so now my classes won't be 36 kids. So that's kind of a relief. And I've been making it work, but you do what you got to do for the kids. One other thing, we've been fortunate enough to go on field trips, and the kids are so appreciative of being able to get out. We took a field trip to the Sky Cinema in the rail yard, and we used public transportation because one of the things we're talking about is carbon footprint. How can we lessen our carbon footprint? Use public transportation. So it was a cool way to show them how we can physically lessen our carbon footprint. And on Monday and Tuesday, I'm actually taking my kids to Ghost Ranch. So if any of you on the board would like to come along, my email is mapacheco@sfps.k12.nm.us. So you're more than welcome to ride the bus with us and kind of see a day-to-day life of what the stress that we go through on a field trip is astronomical. So if any of you would like to come, let me know, and I'll put you on the roster so we can put you on the bus chart so all the legal grounds are covered there. So thank you. Have a good evening.
This concludes public forum.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Milton, can I just confirm we are streaming audio only, we think?
Yeah, we're streaming audio only, but the cameras are down.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Glad we got the sound up. We will go ahead and move on to Roman numeral 5 on our agenda, the union update. Welcome, Ms. Cartier.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Griffin, President Noble, Vice President Bose, members of the board, and everybody else in the public. My name is Alana Cartier. I serve as a school nurse at Aspen Community School, and I am the outgoing president of NEA Santa Fe. This will be my final union update as the president, and I will be transitioning into the role of executive vice president, so I will still be part of the team. Christy Krennick, who brings extensive stand up experience within the district and the PED, has already begun practicing her role as the new president. So we're transitioning as best we can right now. She will officially take office June 1st. So I want to express my sincere gratitude to everybody I've worked with over the last 2 years. I sincerely appreciate it. With that being said, as the school year draws to a close, I want to encourage everybody to attend as many year-end events and graduations occurring across the district. There are numerous in our neighborhood schools. As educators, we remain dedicated to guiding our students towards success as they embark on their next chapters. Finally, NEA Santa Fe continues to collaborate with SFPS on negotiating our collective bargaining agreement, and we remain optimistic about reaching a conclusion soon. And that is my final presidential union update.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your service and work with NEA Santa Fe. Okay, we'll move on to Roman numeral 6, board announcements and follow-up. Any announcements from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead to Roman numeral 7, our student board members presentation. Who starts here?
Daphne is not here today, so Bo will be taking over the school announcements for Daphne, and I'll be taking over the presentation announcements.
Okay, marvelous.
Cool. For Capital High School, Capital is gearing up for their senior awards night, which will take place on Friday, May 15th at 6:30. 61 Capital School seniors have been awarded the New Mexico State Seal of Billingsism and Biliteracy. And they will be celebrated during the senior award night. 6 Capital student Simon Scholars were celebrated on Saturday in Albuquerque. James Harris, Osmel Pacheco, Edwin Lopez, our very own Daphne, and Katie Marquez, Mariah Chavez, and being named a Simon Scholar is considered a significant honor because it recognizes both achievement and perseverance.
For Santa Fe High School, we held our annual Honors Blue and rowing ceremony. Several of our students, I would say actually almost all of us, received honors and awards during the ceremony as well as recognition. Our ROTC unit has been selected as the 2026 Distinguished Unit. Santa Fe High variety show nights have been successful with our talented musician teachers representing their many talents. And 22 seniors have been awarded the New Mexico State Seal of Bilingualism and Biliteracy. Many of our seniors were recognized as Simon Scholars as well.
And for ECO celebrated the end of the school year with an annual cookout. It was filled with good food and competitions. Students participated in tournaments that included a 3-on-3 basketball tournament, cornhole, and pickleball. For students who didn't want to compete with that, they had Mario Kart, karaoke, and other games. And it was a great way to reset for preparing for the exam week. For Mandela, you are all invited to their 10th grade personal project fair on Monday from 12:45 to 2. Every sophomore will be sharing their personal project in the gym with all students and their greater community. On Tuesday, all students are engaging in service projects in their accumulation of stepping up and giving back. Thank you for the support for an excellent year. We look forward to seeing you at the graduation, said in my announcements.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
And now we'll be moving on to the board presentation, and I think we go down.
I can use my teaching voice, or I can just also use the microphone. But buenas tardes, Presidenta Noble, Vicepresidenta Bosé, miembros de la Junta Directiva y Superintendenta Doctora Griffin. This presentation, we're not showing it? Okay. But do you have the presentation with you? Perfect. So this presentation is a presentation about Policy 356, which basically is about student engagement and, hold on, let me see this. Student engagement and student voice. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, that's fine. Perfect. There it is. Nice. So that's what it is. The Policy 356 is how to engage the students, thank you, into using the voice and participating in the district. So on this page, page number 3, we have a list of the trainings that all student representatives from middle schools and high schools from our student councils have received in the last 3 years. So twice a year, representatives from student councils, middle schools and high schools go to BF Young, and they have received a training on leadership and training on how to create surveys and other topics. You also have a link there where it says activities to some photos of their student work. And I'm gonna go specifically to this year, 25-26, because in the next slide, you'll see on the left-hand side, you have the evidence of the trainings that they received. So in the fall, in November, Mr. Villarreal and I, we co-facilitated a training. Mr. Villarreal led the leadership traits. So there's an activity with 10 polls that it was about leadership traits, how to be good leaders. So he was leading that activity. And then I co-facilitated, and then the second activity the students had was a hands-on, in which in 3 groups, all the schools had to list what extracurricular activities, what opportunities, what sports they had in their schools, like list them all, what was offered by the schools. And they were brainstorming, thinking, and some of them were seeing what was common in different schools. On the right-hand side, you'll see the pictures from the training I facilitated in March. So there was, again, an activity on leadership. This time was Web of Connectedness. I can't talk tonight. I can do it in Espanol, no English. The Web of Connectedness, and it was like about teamwork and how important in the student councils it is to be part of a team and use different strengths. So they learned that piece. And in the bottom one, you'll see how they started working on selecting 3 topics for the survey and creating survey questions. So that's part of the work they did here and here. And in the next slide, you'll see the topics that our former board members presented to the board last year are listed in the 24-25. They created a survey with those 3 topics. And then this year, from 25-26, our 3 board members selected different 3 topics: quality of a school, discipline and teacher response, and discipline and inclusivity. So now, I was gonna pass it to Daphne, and unfortunately she couldn't be here for a great reason, because she's interviewing for a scholarship. So we wish her the best. Hopefully she can obtain it. So it's a great reason to not be here. But now I'm gonna pass the mic to the student board members, because they're gonna tell you what the survey was and the results and the recommendations for the board. So it's their work. Because this is a student-created survey for students.
So our first topic was quality of your school. We had 1,017 student participants, which is a great number. I think it's one of our most highly yielding surveys of this year. 60% of our students reported that classrooms or offices were uncomfortably hot or cold for more than 1 week during the year. Over 20% reported broken lockers, and 20% reported missing bathroom stall doors and other missing bathroom appliances such as soap. A little bit under 20% of our students stated that there were maintenance issues causing them to avoid certain school areas, such as bathrooms. Students also reported roof leaks, out-of-order sinks and water fountains, foul odors, and pest sightings in schools. On the right is the breakdown. So Our students recommended improving maintenance response times for repairs, such as in bathrooms, prioritizing heating, cooling, and ventilation issues across campuses, repairing broken locks, bathroom stalls, sinks, and water fountains, as well as making bathrooms more accessible, continuing to address cleanliness concerns in bathrooms and common areas, to improve systems for students to report maintenance and facility problems, increasing efforts to prevent vandalism, and students emphasized a clean and safe school in order to improve learning and school pride. And then handing it off to Bo.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bo Reeves. I'm the second student board member. We did this. I orchestrated this topic on discipline and inclusivity by the teachers and how the students felt by about how they wanted to be needed by the teachers. About 68% of students said principals and teachers are handling discipline appropriately, and 32% students said discipline is not being handled the right way, and 39% students said teachers are not always do not always treat students equally or respectfully, which is kind of interesting to think about, especially when we see, especially like older teachers coming in and getting ready to retire. I can say that for my school, especially because I have an older teacher, and he's getting ready to retire, and obviously they can't wait to end their teaching career. Students that identify the most disruptive things in school is excessive talking, phone distractions, and students not paying attention, repeated disruptions without consequences. Mainly just inconsistent classroom environments. Students obviously want a consistent classroom environment orchestrated by a teacher. If we can go to the next slide. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, okay, I got you. Obviously, students want something that is fair, consistent, respectful, and applied to all students equally, which is obviously fair, but we're not always there to monitor teachers, so I don't know how we would solve that. And students recommend a more restorative conversations before severe punishment, things like in-school suspension, parent involvement, and clearer consequences for repeated behavior issues, obviously intervention before increased like behavior, before something worse happens. And students emphasize that stronger teacher-student relationships improve classroom behavior and engagement. Me personally, I can say that is something I can agree with. And moving on.
And then this is my topic, which was discipline and inclusivity in schools. Very similar to Bo's. The majority of students reported mixed experiences regarding inclusion and belonging at school. It was mostly 50-50. The average student reported on school inclusion, average student scale reporting on school inclusion was 3 out of 5. And 16% of our students rated their sense of inclusion on low, which is 1 to 2 out of 5 on a scaled voting system. The majority of students' concerns revolved around bullying, favoritism, unequal treatment among student groups, and lack of student voice in school decisions, which I believe this is helping to combat. Some students reported feeling disconnected from school activities and their programs, and reported additionally programs being inaccessible or unknown to a bunch of students. I learned about at least 10 new programs that my school offered during the robing ceremony yesterday that I wasn't aware of. Students also expressed interest in stronger peer support and mental health resources. Students mostly recommended increased opportunities for student voice in school decisions and campus decisions, so the surveys are working and we want more of them. Expand programs that encourage belonging, leadership, and peer connection, kind of in tune with that school spirit that we saw earlier, and continued improving access to counselors and mental health resources. I know that several counselors this year at Santa Fe High are quitting. Encourage staff training focuses on inclusivity, respectful communication, and student engagement. The students want promoted restorative practices that build accountability while maintaining student dignity. Increased awareness campaigns focused on kindness, inclusion, and positive school cultures. And student emphasize that stronger relationships between student and staff improve overall climate. And then this is last year's survey.
So besides the, like I say, this is a survey created by students for students. The respondents were students in grades 6 to 12, middle school and high school, from all our middle schools and high schools, including the K-8s. We included 3 more questions with the topics from last year, just to compare and see if the students felt that things had been improved. So maybe the numbers are too small over there, but what they have is a scale, 3 questions only on the 3 topics. The first topic was quality of school meals from last year. The second topic was cleanliness and maintenance of the schools. And the third topic was feeling supported at school. So we were basically asking them, compared to last year, how do you think, are things improving for this year or not? And these are the responses. So basically in the quality of school meals, you'll see that there's like a 43.2%, that is like no change. And then between 4 and 5, because this is a scale from much worse to much improved. So if we add 4 and 5, with 5 is much improved, it will be about 22.4%. In the cleanliness and maintenance of schools, again, there was from much worse to much improved. 43.1% was like neutral. And then in the much improved, it was between 4th and 5 is 32.8 in their responses. And feeling supported at school, which is kind of like also linked to one of the topics from this year. Do you feel that you're belonging? Do you feel included? The responses were, we had also a high number of 43%, like no change. And in the 4 and 5 scales, with 5 being much more supported and 1 being much less supported, it will be around 36.9. This responses had a little bit more, and the reason why is I left it open, and then when the students did the work, there was 1,017 responses, and now we collected 1,025 up to yesterday, and I closed it. But it's been a great response from the students, and hopefully we can continue offering here not only their voice, but the recommendations. So thank you for listening to us. If you have any questions for us.
Okay, thank you very much. That's wonderful. I love this. And the comparison to last year is much appreciated. Questions from the board? Comments? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, President Noble. No questions, just want to say thank you. I really enjoyed all of your monthly survey updates. I appreciate all the work you put into that, and having the end of year presentation is great. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Congratulations. I guess we've reached the end of the year. Really appreciate your work and being with us this year.
Our last board meeting, it's sad.
It is sad. We really appreciate you and the questions and engagement, and we will be, frankly, worse off without you. Okay, we'll move on to our budget, our superintendent announcements and follow-up. Superintendent.
Thank you, President Noble. I actually have no announcements tonight. I'm going to save them for the next board meeting.
Fair enough. All right. We'll move on to item 9 on our agenda, our budget presentation, an action item, the 2026-2027 Santa Fe Public Schools operating budget. Dr. Griffin?
All right. Thank you, everyone. Board President Noble, Superintendent Dr. Griffin, for what hopefully will be the last presentation, and you won't have to see me for a while, but I did bring a couple team members again. ones that really do a lot of the, most of the work. I just kind of oversee. We have Regina Mascareñas, who's our Director of Operational Budget, and Beverly Aguilar, who's our Deputy CFO. So what we decided, the last couple presentations have been focusing, and rightfully so, on the operational budget. Well, what we thought we would do is kind of go over the other funds that are within the what you'll be approving, and that's our operating budget. And there's several different funds, each with their different characteristics. So some of you may already be familiar with these, but we thought, you know, with a new board member and a refresher might be in store for the rest. So this slide is one that we've flashed up often. It has slightly been updated. We did get some more grant awards, so we're inching that number up. Again, if any awards come in after the budget has been approved, we will notify you and have your approval through a budget adjustment request. But hopefully we'll get more of those in to lessen the amount of bars that we inundate you with. So the first set of funds are the ones that we've been focusing on. There's actually two of them. There's this little baby operational fund that's somewhat new. It's where they put the local revenue, the property taxes. It was split off, I think, because of the SUNY lawsuit, but I'm not 100% certain with that. It used to all be within the same fund. We used to be able to keep a portion of our local revenue, and the rest would be sent back to the school. They'd apply it against our SEG, but they now have this separate fund that operates much like an operational fund. That one's about $2 million a year. I gave a little bit of a history on what the funding was on each of those. Obviously, the larger operational fund is where the SEG resides, and that number, the combined $153 million, is what was presented on the previous slide. That's what we consider our operational budget. Pupil transportation is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty restrictive in that it could only be used to transport students to and from school. No activities, no after school, anything like that. Just to and from. It did go through, this one kind of has the funding you could see has gone up quite a bit. In 2024, it was only 3.4 million. And 4.3, and I was actually expecting to see a decrease between 25 and 26, but it actually went up to 4.8 million, and we haven't received the allocation yet, but we feel that it is going to adjust downward because it is based on ridership and miles, the route miles, and so forth. So we're anticipating it going down, but you know, we'll be prepared for whatever the final number comes in. This is the fund, and I've mentioned it in the bullets, is that there is this reversion clause that we have to send back half of what our cash balance is at the end of the year. We're committed to not sending a single penny. You know, we're going to keep what they sent us. We have a plan in place. Regina's been real instrumental in getting those working, everything in place, the purchase orders, the orders, and we have a backup plan in case we can't get all those invoices by the end of the year. But we are definitely committed to not sending anything back. The Student Nutrition Fund, there's also a new fund in this. It's a universal free meals. It's a state grant that's real similar to the USDA ones. Well, we here at SFPS use it only for food purchases. You could see what the amounts are on those. The good news on these is there is no award letter like a lot of the other grants. If we have the numbers to submit the meals, they'll fund us for that. So it really isn't capped, if you will. we have seen some increases. You'll be seeing a budget adjustment request in the next month or so, where we're going to increase our budget because our claims have been quite a bit more than what we budgeted. We feel it's going to be about 7.5 combined for next year. The athletics and activities, we mostly self-supporting, fundraising and whatnot. The activity fund is mostly at the school sites, and it's where they have all the, it's the fun fund. It's where, you know, they could use it for food and gifts and parties and so forth, and some incentives and whatnot. And we estimate the total to be about $4 million, which is about what it ended this year with. The grants awards, we couldn't fit them all on this, obviously, but it is in the appendix. Again, we started to get a few more of those in. We're at about 19 million. They come from either the federal, the state, or local sources. Most of them are on a reimbursement basis. This is where it gets tricky, especially at the end of the year. We try to get these requests for reimbursement submitted as quickly as we can, and get those submitted so we could get our cash and we don't end the year with such a large cash balance that we have to cover with operational. The capital outlay funds, there's quite a few in here. You've seen the legislative awards. There's also this one we get every now and then. It's mostly for like paving projects and access. It's from the Department of Transportation. That's that is in Fund 31400. The SB and HB funds are the ones that are generated from the property taxes. SB 9 is the larger of the two, 14 million versus 10 million. The HB 33 one allows for salaries, and every year when we're asked to put together a legislative request, mine's always the same, and that they should allow a little bit more flexibility with the SB 9 funding, because you could purchase units, HVAC or whatnot, but you can't purchase or you can't pay for the maintenance of those. You can't hire someone to maintain it, and we all know that proper maintenance is what you get to extend the useful life of an asset. So every year we hope that they would loosen it, but for now we do definitely utilize HB 33 for some of our salaries, and the SB 9 we want to use a little bit more. The cash balance has grown quite a bit, so I think when I see these range of funds, I think what I'll try to tell people is that it allows us to be flexible. If there's someone who needs a purchase of whatever, we can always find the best fit for that. If it's capital, we have several capital funds we could cover it with. Obviously, food comes out of one, or transportation, so it's pretty much matching up the fund with what the needs are. And you'll see that's one of the reasons why we took out all the capital expenditures out of the operational fund, because we have these other funds that could cover it, and may as well utilize it there. The debt service fund I rarely speak of, because it's really just there to pay off our principal and interest. There's really no decision behind it. We can't move it out and use it for anything else. But it's also part of the property taxes to repay those bonds that we just sold today. They'll be getting paid back from this fund. And now as we do often, we give the update to the board questions. There weren't quite as many this time, but we were asked to do a take-home analysis, and hopefully you could see it there. But what it basically is looking at is different scenarios of a person making the question, or what we were tasked with was to ensure that no employee of ours takes home less money next year than they do this year. And we The only ones that would really have a chance of seeing a decrease are the ones that are already at the 80-20 split. Those, for us, it was anyone making 50,000 or less. So we've kind of laid it out what 1% would mean for each of those. We believe that a lot of these are taken care of with our minimum wage changes. That should bring a lot of these up enough to cover and ensure that there is no decrease in take-home. The rest, we just left it at 1% because we're still in negotiations and we didn't want to assume anything above that. But we definitely have heard the will of the board, and we'll definitely make it a priority that we don't have a situation where any of our employees are taking home less money. Another thing we were asked to look into was the idea of bringing the substitute services in-house. So what we've done is set up some timelines where we're going to, in June and July, leadership will be meeting to create a multi-pronged approach to addressing staff absences. In the fall, from August to December, we're going to assemble a task force and maybe look at the underlying causes that perhaps are driving some of these absences. You know, if we could somehow lessen the demand for substitutes, and that would be half the battle, really. We wouldn't have to fill as many. So aren't saying we have all the answers yet, but that's why we're going to have this task force assembled to take a look at that. And then finally, in the spring, next spring, we'll be updating the board on the contract and what the next steps are based on the work that we've done. So here's some of the appendixes. You could probably see it better on your handouts. This is just a list of some of the grants that we have received word or could estimate comparison with what we received this year. The grants take up 2 of the pages, and then the capital outlay fund kind of gives you an idea of how we came up with the $99 million number. So, and with that, we'll stand for questions.
Okay, I have asked that we can look at the slides from last week because I'm not really, frankly, comfortable adopting a budget where we don't see what's in our budget. And that is what we're being asked to do tonight. I know we are looking at the various different funds, and we can go to that first slide. I do want to clarify, and again, this was in the newspaper, the difference between last year and this year has a lot to do with the grants, because the grants don't come in by this time. So we will, for FY26 actuals, it does look higher than the FY27 projected because we simply haven't projected basically the difference of $7 million in the grants budget. So that's the difference. It's not that our budget is, and again, there was, I feel, inaccurate reporting on this. It's not that our budget is for FY27 substantially less than FY26, it's that those grants haven't come in, so clarifying that piece. And again, you know, I don't know what the pleasure of the rest of the board is. I'm feeling here we are with the three, the first step, second step, third step that we went through last time on the operational budget, you know, anyway, I think this gives us a better picture of what is actually in our budget. And personally, I want this in front of me as we consider where there is a little bit of flexibility. I'm appreciating being reminded of where we've seen changes in the operational budget, because as we went through the definitions, and I appreciate those, Mr. Halford, but we do have sort of just definitions of the other items of the operating, which is the umbrella budget. The operational budget is where we do the work and have done the work. So
the slide that's on the screen right now is, I suppose, the budget. I mean, I guess I'd like to be taken through what we're being asked to adopt here. I feel like I'm filling in blanks, and I'm not sure that's entirely appropriate right now.
Yeah, so right now, as it stands, the approval would be for the 419 million. This is how it lays out as of today. The operational budget really hasn't gone through any changes since we last spoke. We have had some negotiations, but nothing has come to any decisions based from those negotiations, so we don't have any updates from that. We were asked to look at HR, the initiatives, and see if we could beef that up. We felt a lot of those were, if we were to take in the substitute services, so it's probably something, if we do decide to go that route, that we would do a budget adjustment request next year when we know for certain, when we have a better idea of what the expenses would entail, whether it was software or how many FTEs we would need to handle that. So we did hear that there was some interest in that area. So we haven't costed out yet, but it is something that we will be having some thoughtful conversations about and bringing some adjustment requests if that's the decision the board decides to go in.
Thank you, President Noble. I'm just wondering if, I know we put those slides up for a quick run through, if you could maybe walk us through all of that again.
Yeah, sure.
Just so that we have the full picture all together now.
Sure, yeah. So what the intent of these next three slides are is that we wanted to show some purposeful movement to get to the final amount that we're requesting. And so what we decided to do, we thought a good place would be the base, which is what it would cost to basically open the doors with nothing else, no increases, no considerations for minimum wage. That's our baseline. And then what we did was we thought the logical first step would be all the things that we're obligated to do either through statute or with the city. And so that's those 5 columns that you see there. We also tried to show what categories it would fall under. And of course, all of these compliance items fall within the salary and benefits. The increase of 1%, that number is does not include the minimum wage work, because that would obviously give those individuals more than 1%, so that would satisfy that requirement. That the 1% that's in that first column is for everyone else who wouldn't be affected by the minimum wage. We did calculate the 80/20 cost. We estimate to be $976,000, but we do acknowledge that there could be some decisions made based on if someone may opt for a higher end plan because now more of it's being covered, or if someone has a spouse that was having coverage elsewhere, they may opt to take up what we offer. But we really hadn't had any concrete numbers on that to put any cost to that. So we're just assuming that the same participation would happen, and that's what the cost up on that second column is. The level advancement, this was, we had 103 teachers that would be eligible to advance on their licensure. And for those who aren't as familiar with the salary schedules, there's 3 salary schedules for the teachers. There's a level 1, 2, and 3. They all have minimum starting salaries based on them. They're about $10,000 for each. So for whether you go from level 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, we estimate about $10,000 for each of those. And there's 103 individuals that we anticipate moving up a level. not to get ahead, but we did expect to use cash balance for that, which on the surface may, we've always preached that the recurring expenses shouldn't be coming from cash, but the idea behind using cash for these is that they'll eventually be in the funding formula. They'll be in the TCI submission, the Teacher Cost Index, which is a multiplier in the funding formula. What the intent of that is that if you have higher salaried, higher experienced teachers, they cost more, and so the factor is meant to give you the funding to cover those. So we felt that because we haven't received the funding for these individuals yet, that we could use the cash to bridge to that, and then eventually the SEG would cover it. The world language, that was, there's this new PD accreditation process that they're rolling out, and part of the accreditation is to ensure that every school offers language other than English. We estimate the cost for that to be $342,000. So we went from the base, and I think that's 140. I'm having trouble reading the numbers, but it brings the total to $153,265,000. And you'll notice that same amount is a starting point for the next slide, which is our second step, and that's part of the budget process is we asked each of the schools for some ideas on what if they could ask anything or for any additional funding above what we've discussed, then we would consider it at a later date, and that's what we did here. We identified 4 main areas where the request fell out. We labeled the first one behavioral initiatives. That's the hiring of 4 dean of students, and we identified what schools they are down below. It's Amyville, El Camino, Kearney, and Pinon. We also approved the request for a restorative justice program at Capitol High School. The math literacy was part of, there's an adoption that we're going to try to do as much of that as we can this year. So it may not hit next year, but either way, we were planning on using cash. So whether the cash is used before the end of the year or after the roll of the year, it'll be covered one way or the other with cash. The athletics was some initiative. There was, if you recall, there was a pretty comprehensive presentation given by our athletic director. These were some of the costs that he felt would be necessary to bring them up to a more competitive level. And so we granted that request and have it here. And the final one is to support summer school, and then there were some salary requests that were kind of some cleanup to help with scheduling and for retention, some 0.6s converted to 0.8s and 0.8s up to 1.0. A bunch of little requests for that principals told us that it would either help with coverage at their school or just retain people or maybe just so that one person wasn't going to 3 different sites. Maybe now it's just 2, but we did identify a few of those, and that's part of that $437,000. That brings the total up to the $155,733. And then that amount goes into the third step, which is where we added some board initiatives. CIS, Community and Schools, was slated to get $200,000, and the additional $60,000 would bring it up to the $260,000 level that they're getting funded this year. And then the Human Resources was initiative from the previous year that would help, we believe, in helping quicker turnaround time to get people hired and on board, and compliance and some others. And We estimate that to be $450,000, which brings our total up to the $156,243, which exceeds the revenue that we brought in or expected to bring in, but we did identify that cash could be used for the non-recurring items, the math initiatives, and then the cash for the level advancements we thought was an appropriate use of cash to help us get those individuals paid before it becomes part of the funding formula.
President Noble, so thank you. So this number that is our grand total number there, 156,243,039, should that be on the first slide of that? Is that our operational number?
I would characterize that as that's where if we were to make no further changes and get it approved, that's what we would start to get entered and for submission to PD. The final piece of that is PD does require that we budget every single dollar we have, all of our cash. So we'll probably be, the final number would be higher than that just because of that requirement that PD has. It would be somewhere around 174 million once we add the cash back in. We're still trying to, we have some initiatives that we're working on to try to get that cash balance down to closer to what the cash balance policy is, the 7.5%. Currently, we're estimating around 12%.
Okay. I'm trying to understand what the difference is between that number and the top number on the second column of page 2 of tonight's presentation, the 153,885.
It should be those two cash amounts. So what the 153 was just revenue that we're bringing in. Nothing that's already in the bank, the cash. We're sitting at about 18 million, so 2 million of that would be used for the non-recurring and the level advancements. So yeah, the first slide is just revenue, doesn't show any of the cash. It's just what brand new transfers in that we expect to have for next year from our SCG, from our local, the property taxes, our rentals, and so forth.
Okay.
I guess following up on that, I mean, what then this first slide in tonight's presentation is we're being asked to approve a revenue budget, not even an expenditure budget. Because what we went through in terms of the expenditures included the cash things, which got us up to 156,243. But the budget we're being asked to approve is just a straight up, this is the revenue that we have budget.
Yeah. No, and I apologize if that's misleading. It wasn't meant to be, and I may have misspoke when I said that this is what you would be approving, because it would be that plus the 2 million in cash that would require us to cover some of the items that were non-recurring. So we could update it to show the exact amount that we're asking approval for, but it's basically the amount on that slide plus the 2.4 million of cash that we've identified in this slide.
Board Member Blaya.
Okay, just so I understand, so what you're saying is tonight's presentation, and by the way, thank you for the page numbers. So on page 2, this budget is the expenditures and revenue that's coming in, that's the budget, but what's on page step 3 with the 156,243, that's the amount that's going to get added to with the cash to cover all that other stuff, right? So then when we vote to approve, we're voting to approve the 156,243 because it includes the cash.
Yeah, if approved, when we do enter these, would enter 131,830,000 in salary and benefits and so forth down the line. They will ask for, on the revenue side, what we have to support this budget. Would enter 153 million, but there's also a place to enter cash there. And we usually, just as practice, like to have that as a final step, because in all honesty, having us budget every single penny we get is a bit irresponsible. If we're to spend every penny that they give us authorization for, we'd have zero cash to start the year with. And we have our RFRs alone are about $4 million at the end of the year, so it's just not practical to have. But it's a requirement from PD. They consider that a balanced budget if the total revenue and cash equal the expenditures. So we usually put that in restrictive. There's a certain function for where restricted expenditures, the tax liability, the things that really aren't touched, we just put it there just to say, okay, PD, here's a balanced budget. You know, it's also the final step because there's all the spending going on up until the very end. So at some point, you know, we have to cut it off, obviously, and get the number submitted to PD. But the closer we get to the end of the year, you know, the more the expenses are settled, the more revenue we know of, and so forth. So it's definitely the final step. But, and we could give some updates on that, what it ended up being. I think, as I like to see this, is the spending plan that if you give approval, then all the things that we identified, we would be obligated to carry out and cover. These are all just estimates of the cost of that, so it's pretty much giving us the approval to move forward with those initiatives, and you know, and we probably would be giving updates with negotiation as well, and as grants come in and so forth.
Board Member Beta.
Okay, so as I understand this, we had a first step that showed expenses, then a second step where we added more to the expenses, and now a third step where we added even more to the expenses, so that we have a total of expenses of 156,243,039 of expenses.
Yes.
But we only have revenue of 153,826 to cover those expenses, which leaves a shortfall of $2,417,039. And the way we're going to cover that shortfall, or the difference between our revenue and expenses, is we're going to use 1.387039 for cash for non-recurring expenses, and then another 1,030,000 for cash to cover level advancements until the TSI increases. So when you put your expenses plus your revenues and this cash, we have a balanced budget because we have enough revenue to cover the expenses.
Yeah, well said, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Board Member Blaya.
So I have a question that's not related to that, but can I, so one of the things that update to board questions in tonight's presentation was about that substitute thingy. And so I was wondering if we looked at the opportunities to amend it, potentially, the contract. Is there any opportunity for that? Did we follow up on that at all? I know that's not for you, but.
If I may, and just real quick, there is, what is in here includes $3 million for that company. No question about that. And I get that a budget is our revenues plus cash, and what we bring in. I'm still kind of unclear as to what 153,885 is, which is in the budget on page 2 of tonight's presentation. And I do want to get to, but there has, I think the answer to what we were told last meeting is they don't actually want a budget anymore for HR, which was one of the directions. It doesn't seem to appear, I don't think, in the questions here, but that's what I heard, is like there's 450,000 and that's what they're comfortable with, and we're being asked to approve $3 million that would go to the ESS contract. So just to say, that's where we are in terms of the numbers of what we're looking at tonight. Nothing has changed based on our conversations last time. This is the same. What the numbers don't seem to match, and I can't figure out what's what. But I guess I'll stop there and say, you know, to Board Member Blea's question, has there been any work or any progress in the looking at amending that contract?
Board President Noble.
Mr. Granada will answer that question. Thank you.
Board President, board members, Member Blea, I've looked at the contract, and basically the contract is valid. It went out for an RFP process, and you know, it was approved last July by the board. I can certainly look into possibilities of amending the contract, but I think the big issue is not necessarily the contract. We're basically obligated to pay for the substitutes that are requested by the district. And when the board contemplated this contract, when the services were provided by HR, the fill rate for those subs was quite low. It was in the high 40s, around 50%. Currently, the fill rate is in the low 70s, and so what's happened, and also the board increased the minimum wage for those employees, and so there's been a number of things that have happened to increase the cost of providing subs in the district, and those are, you know, the increase for the pay of those subs. There have been more subs requested by teachers, and then the company that we're currently contracting with is filling those subs at a greater rate than we were able to do. And so I think what we need to do is look at that contract for the next year and look at, you know, what's best for the district in terms of whether we want to bring this in-house or work with ESS again. The contract can only be extended 1 year after this contract. It'd need to go out to RFP again.
Thank you.
And you know, I think going back to the whole question of what's being approved here, is it the expenses, is it the revenue? Yeah, I think what part of why we show the revenue is that it does make up 98% of, if you take 156 million and 153 million is going to be covered with new money. It kind of, to give you, the board, the assurance that that money is solid, that the budget is based on a solid foundation. You know, if we had a tighter cash, then that would be obviously more critical, because then every penny, you know, is I think we're blessed with a cash balance that we definitely could cover 156 million, even if the revenue were to fall short. But we're pretty confident in those numbers. We've reviewed them. The majority of that is SEG, and that's pretty much set. And then the property taxes are pretty. That was part of why I also showed that trend, but down below each of those slides had a little bit of a slide to show like the last 3 or 4 years. That was also to give that assurance that, okay, I see where last year we brought in 2,077,000 property taxes, and as you heard from RBC, the base is going up, so we could even estimated more than that. We just took what we got this year and said that's a safe number to project for next year, but that's definitely going up. So that's part of the point of showing all the revenues, is that the budget that you're being asked to present is based on solid ground.
Go ahead, Board Member Beta.
Thank you, President Noble. Okay, maybe I'm missing it, but on slide 2, you have FY '27 projected operational 153,885, but on the step slides, there's a different number. It's not. It's pretty close, but it's not 153,885.
I think part of it is that we flip back to the presentation of last year. I think there was a slight change in the number. I could find out. I think one of the The revenues, when I looked at it again this week, it inched up a bit, so there might have been a slight change. I probably should have, when I went through that, kind of identified what changed from one slide to the next. I think part of it may be that we flipped back to last week's presentation and the number had changed slightly, but
So if you go back to last week's presentation, what was that number? 153?
let's see, oops. 153, 885.
885 and then 153, 826. Those are the two numbers that are confusing me because one is, so which one is it? They're close.
I would say the one on the most recent is the updated, because we did take another look at some of the revenues, and I don't know if it was rental. I can't remember exactly which one it was. It was in the operational budget that we had a slight uptick in it, so I adjusted it accordingly.
So the slide, the third step slide, the anticipated revenue should read 153, 885, not 153, 826.
That's correct, yeah, we didn't go back, and what I probably should have done is repeated these three steps in this slide with an update to that.
Because then that's gonna also mess a little bit with the cash for non-recurring and cash for cover level of advancement. I mean, we're talking thousands, not millions, but still, there's a difference. Okay, as far as the HR budget, we're adding 450,000 to the HR budget compared to last year's HR budget to address the board's issues regarding retention and, not retention, but onboarding and some of the issues that we've heard about HR over the past couple of years, really. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, President Noble.
Board Member Blaya.
And so just to be clear, thank you, President Noble. Just to be clear, so revenue's kind of going to shift, and they're going to continue to shift, right? But at some point, you have to say, this is where it's at, and we're going to go with this, because there's still grants coming in, and there's still stuff coming in. So that's going to be, like even next week, if we did it again, I'm not suggesting we do, I'm just saying there might be some differences again because other stuff has come in. So we're kind of with the revenues looking at a moving target because it hasn't like solidified or anything yet, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I think another way of looking at it, and there's always this challenge when you present, we used to present this massive budget with these account strings that are like 20-something digits long, and trying to decipher that and say, here you go, approve this. And, of course, no one's going to know so what we try to do is put the narrative behind it and say, what you're really approving are those things that we said that we're going to commit to giving a 1% minimum wage. And it's pretty much, the approval is to say, yes, go forward with those, and we want to see you put the money there. Whether those, and even those are estimates, whether HR ends up costing $445,000 or $455,000, the intent is that we will address those, the issues that you brought forward. So I think I look at it more as it's a blueprint of what you want us to accomplish this year in our budget, and then we'll make it happen with, even that revenue, it's just another evidence that we're constantly, we want to get this as close as possible. And so, if new information comes up, we will, update it accordingly so that we have, the idea is that next year when we start, it's a pretty much as accurate as you could about what we expect to receive.
Yep. If I may, on that point, just to say, the operational budget, and again, slide 2 of tonight's presentation, which we don't need to pull up. I think we could stay on the third step. That's an important slide for us. But our operational budget is fed by the SEG. Honestly, that's not changing. That revenue's not changing. There is a mid-year update in January. And so that's a very predictable thing. We have the SEG established for FY27. We will get a mid-year update usually in January or February. Sometimes they'll do a final adjustment before the end of the year. I don't think there's ever been more than 2 adjustments in the SEG. Okay, I'm seeing nods. Thank you. Appreciate that. The revenue that changes is the grants, Because if we get more grants, we get more grants. But the revenue doesn't change that much. So this is not a moving target. And to be clear, what we're doing, and generally in the operational budget, is prioritizing what those expenditures go to. And the 3 steps that we went through last time established the baseline of what we need to do in order to keep the basic program as it exists this year, and then those added on things. What the board has changed, really, is only the communities and schools contract, and then there are some other things that have been added in, including the HR. We asked for additional consideration of that last week, but again, this is not, and we do budget adjustment requests throughout the year, budget adjustments that then if we get a new grant, we increase our revenue, because this board, let's be clear, has the budget. This is one of the 3 things we do. We oversee the superintendent, we oversee policy, and we oversee the budget and finances of the district. So, when we do this and throughout the year, we adjust the budget. If different things come in for HB 33 or our mill levy, we do that. But substantially, things are set for half a year, and if there's a big change in the SEG, then we adjust the budget mid-year. And sorry, I think you had a follow-up, so go ahead.
No, I appreciate that, Board President. I guess the only reason I was asking is because of the differences between the numbers, like the revenues are really what are causing the discrepancy. So that's correct, that's really what it was. And so that's the only reason I was asking, just to clarify in my head, so that way I'm not thinking about it tonight.
No, Board Member Bea, that's accurate. The only changes we have made are on the revenue side.
Right.
The expenses are still
Right.
as they are here.
Okay, and then the last question I have, well, not the last, but the question that I had is to that end, because it's budgeted, $3 million budget for the substitute contract. Let's just pretend that the solutions, looking at the root causes and things like that, we could foresee a decrease. We don't have to spend $3 million, right? There is a potential and hope, right, that we could not spend that. Yeah.
Board Member Bea, that's completely accurate. The billing is based on the total number of slots that they fill. It's not a preset amount, 3 million divided by 12. You send us, monthly increments of whatever. It's all based on usage. So if we are able to, whether it's with us taking it in-house or just doing enough to minimize the number of requests, it will come down. So yes, it's based on usage.
Board Member Abeyta.
Thank you, President Noble. Okay, so now that we've gone through what you presented as expenses and revenues, what will be the cash reserve, and what percentage is that? What do we, more or less, will we land up with? Because there still is a cash reserve that's not shown on this 3rd step slide that we have to keep. There's a minimum the state requires, and then there's what we're gonna do. So what will be the cash reserve?
Board Member Abeyta, if I had to put right now, it would probably be around 18.5 million. If we are able to make those math adoption expenditures this year, that's $1 million this year. Of course, we wouldn't have to spend it next year. We're also looking at, well, the transportation aid is a separate one. We're working on getting that cash balance down as well. But yeah, here's what the cash balance policy is. I have in blue the projected amount for FY27, which would put us at 12.3%. I think at one point when we're talking about getting it down, our superintendent had a good observation that we were talking about ways we could get it down, but it wasn't really by this rush to get it down by the end of June, because that would obviously with a month and a half left be a pretty difficult task. But it was okay. Why don't we work at getting this down for the end of next year and get it to a more manageable amount for next year, and then we could do some of the and not to go into too many of the initiatives, but if there is some one-time payments, that would definitely be a way to get that down, if we could find a way to maybe work those into the incentives so that there is this, maybe like perfect attendance or something. But those haven't really been discussed in full, but there are some, it gives us those opportunities if we did decide that, okay, we're not going to have to we're not gonna fix this in a month and a half, but we do have a plan to get it down to where, and I don't think PD would come and sweep it yet. I think we'd get a little bit more notice of that. I think that's part of the concern we have, is that, you know, we definitely don't want to have anything swept, whether it's in this fund or transportation. But it does give us some time to get that down to, and by next spring at this point, maybe it's down to 8% or 7.5% or whatever, you know, how successful we are.
So the 18.5 includes already taking out the 2.4 that we need to balance the budget.
It doesn't, because as it stands there, that's money that we'll use next year. So it'll eventually come out of the 18, or the 18 million will help support that, I guess. Yeah.
So it'll go.
Yeah. It won't have an immediate drop in the number, but it will help fund those initiatives if we do. The salary ones are definitely next year. The math adoption could be this year, it could be next year.
Right, but eventually that 18.5 will go down by this 2.4 million.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I think the 18.5 is before we take out the 2, because that's a projection for the end of FY '26, and what we're looking at is taking out that 2.3 or 4 million for FY '27.
Okay.
And I do think, you know, I mean, I thought we asked for a little bit of a plan of what else we might do in the budget with some cash, which, you know, frankly, I have lots of ideas, but we're not seeing that tonight. Okay, we'll go to Vice President Bozay and then our student board members if they have questions.
Thank you, President Noble. While we were talking about cash, I wanted to highlight it on this screen because that was another thing that I feel like I read in the newspaper and wanted to make sure that we clarified. We're using cash for non-reoccurring. We know that it's not good practice to use that for recurring expenses. And correct me if I'm wrong, this $1,030,000, we anticipate that will be returned to us with the TCI increases.
Vice President Bozay, yes, that's correct. Well, they will be in the submission we make in October, and those teachers, if they are plotted a step or a level above what they are now, it would generate more revenue and therefore, in theory, cover their salaries from that point. But to get there until then is why the cash.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Elling.
Thank you, President Noble and Dr. Griffin. It's not a question. I do have to head out, but
what, do you have things going on this week?
I do, unfortunately. You know, graduation, final stuff. I would like to say it was a pleasure and an honor to work with you guys this school year. I have had so much fun. It has been very interesting. We've completed one of my major goals going in, which was trying to revise standards-based grading, which I think is very good. Thank you guys so much.
We'll see you at graduation.
Thank you so much for being here with us and doing this work, and it's been an honor. Mr. Rivas, are you going to stay and hang out? You're going to go too? You want to say anything? Okay, great.
President Noble. I'm sorry, the cash reserve slide, can you go back to that? Because it's interesting how much it's grown from year over year. Do you have an explanation as to why it's grown so much every year? Because I don't recall as a board us increasing the reserve, or did we? Because I mean, we look at 23, it goes from 8 down to 7, but then it jumps to 13 all the way to 18. Like, what's the reason for the jump in cash reserves?
You know, I think a lot of that is probably driven by vacancies, but I couldn't tell you whether those are substantially higher. You know, if I hadn't left for 6 years, I probably could have some trends for you and available, but I would think that would be the main driver, would be the vacancies.
Okay, I was just wondering. Thank you.
Anybody can answer.
Rick, might your staff have any insight or not necessarily?
If,
I just think they're probably just being very conservative, and we kind of built a budget to be very, not really, we had a lot of vacancy savings, so that vacancy savings really helped us in just being very frugal with our expenditures and to be able to build up a healthy cash balance. Because when Robert Martinez was here, that was his goal, was to make sure that we were in a good financial position to be able to create that and to build that healthy cash balance. So that's why we're in the position we're at now, in a good financial position.
Okay.
And just to repeat it on the microphone, we heard from Ms. Aguilar, the deputy, that we have been doing some work, and it's true, and a lot of it was driven by the audit committee to build up cash balances, I think because FY24 felt uncomfortably low. And we had an audit finding because at one point we had to dip into cash in order to make a payroll in the summer, and there'd been a lot of work, and as Ms. Aguilar rightly points out, the then CFO had worked hard on building this up. The other thing I want to say is we did deliberately for FY26 adopt a conservative budget with flex. And I don't think it's changed much through the year as in terms of the management, but if many of us recall, Dr. Garcia was our interim superintendent when we did the budget last year. And there was, I think, an effort to build it conservatively, to build in some flex for whatever might come this year. So we've ended up where we are now, and obviously it's sort of continued to rise. Vice President Bozay.
Thank you, President Noble. I definitely recall the same thing that you recall about last year's budget and having conversations around federal uncertainty and not knowing what this year would look like. So I think that it's wonderful that we had that cushion. I also think that it's very interesting and maybe timely to consider those numbers in our cash balance in light of our teacher call-outs and how that money might better be spent, at least a little bit of it, to support our staff in the district.
When is the budget due to PED?
Board President Noble, June 1st, 8 a.m., so basically the night before.
And how long does it, how much time is there in inputting it? I mean, I think we've heard there's a week more to.
Yeah, about a week or so. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess there's a question here before the board. I will just voice that I'm pretty uncomfortable, as I'm not real clear what our numbers are, and I'm not real clear if we have any ideas or plans to do something with cash, which even if we, as with the substitute thing, work on a timeline, I'm not even frankly that comfortable that we do a task force. I mean, maybe we need a task force, but I think we have a whole lot of task forces, and we need some smart expertise, analysis, I think, working on things. But I'm trying to think through what we can do here. I was more comfortable last week. I'm guessing that the roughly $60,000 between the revenue is something that got shifted in the 910B5. I'm not that uncomfortable with that, but right now, we have a budget that is substantially what runs our schools, of somewhere in the neighborhood of 153 to 156 million dollars, and we have a total budget of about $17 million. And I don't know, I'm feeling like we don't actually have a clear budget to approve. Go ahead, Vice President Bozay.
Thank you, President Noble. I think as I've sort of sat with my own discomfort, I think the thing that I'm struggling with is really kind of seeing our revenue next to our expenses. And I feel like I hear what Mr. Halford said about, like, we don't need spreadsheets with 16-digit places on them, but we've had this practice of kind of a budget roll-up that we approve. After we go through all of these meetings, we kind of get this final picture of 3 or 4 pages of kind of the general buckets of where money's going and how that overlays with our revenue. And so switching back and forth between the two presentations has helped a little bit, but I also agree with the cash balance projects and would like to have more of an idea / conversation, because this, you know, as we've said, this is our framework and our blueprint, and it's not super clear to me right now.
Board member, or Vice President Bozay, I think part of the issue is a lot of these initiatives, because there has been several conversations, but it's because it does need to be negotiated. It's, you know, we're being careful with, but I think it would take partnership with NEA to come up with some solutions. If, you know, one of the ideas is to have a retention that perhaps is paid out twice a year, like, you know, like half of it in December, half in May, how that would look like, whether it would be, you know, based on attendance or what. We haven't fleshed that out, but, you know, that is definitely, especially when we're only funded for a 1% increase, and with all the challenges that our employees are having with the rising cost of things, that it's a way to get them some of the money that they may have otherwise wanted in the salaries. You know, the next best alternative would be to have these one-time payments that would help us get the cash balance down and not use cash for recurring expenses, which would, you know, I think even PD is cautioned against that. So we're just trying to be careful with, we definitely want to support our employees. We just want to do so in a way that helps us with the cash, but not commit it to recurring expenses later. But there is some, I think, more discussions than what perhaps we've presented.
Thank you. I mean, I do fully understand that, and I don't know what the timeline is looking like on those negotiations, but again, just the practice that I've had for most of my time on the board is to have a more comprehensive picture than this of expenditures and revenue, and more details kind of next to each other.
Board Member Blaya.
Just so, but would having those spreadsheets with all the details, is that like, I guess what I don't understand is at the highest level that we're looking at, I mean, it makes sense. We know what's coming in and we know what's going out. How would the details help, just out of curiosity?
Well, my recollection is that we have seen line items for things like art and music and sports and, you know, revenue, like last year's revenue versus expenses and this year's revenue versus expenses projected. And a line item for curriculum, you know, like there's a whole bunch of line items, and then you can see last year's and this year's next to each other with what was budgeted versus what was actually spent, or what is budgeted, projected and revenues. So.
And I think part of the intent of putting it in these categories was to kind of give you kind of the in-between, not give you, the list of, just raw numbers and try to figure it out. And here's a guide to tell you what these program and object codes mean. But we try to group them in some meaningful way to say, okay, well, salary and benefits account for, the majority of our budget, obviously. And so, and then we tried to show that these changes where they would hit and what the end result is. So you kind of haven't break it down on that final slide. Oh, I was there. Of what the 156 million would include. It would be 131.8 million in salaries and so forth. I'm not going to read them all down, but that kind of gives you some of the larger buckets that we have. We could certainly give you these broken down into.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like we saw more of that through the past few meetings where we were looking at Spanish language. We were looking at those dual language programs. So like those pieces, having all of that in the final presentation so that we remember how that all shakes out. I think that's sort of what I was hoping we would be able to see tonight.
Sorry, and I was thinking, okay, we've already gone over the operational. I think let's take the next step and see what else is in there that they're going to approve. Because I think part of the challenge is that in previous budgets is, okay, we focused on the operational, but what's all this other stuff that we have to approve? And we haven't really had a comprehensive discussion about that. And this wasn't, the intent at least was to give you an idea of the capital projects. Here's what we have available, what it could be used for, and so forth, just to kind of outline the flexibility or
for sure.
Underscore that. But and really, I don't. If these numbers had changed a bit more, then I might have thought it would be worthwhile to go through these again. But since it really hadn't changed much since last time, I thought, okay, we spent quite a bit on that. I'll just rather than take the time to go over that again, I thought moving into the other funds would, and then the recap of everything, what it would be, the 419, 20 million or whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you. It makes a lot of sense to me. I'll use the example, since Ms. Gonzalez is in the audience, that what I have heard a lot of times after budget season is you cut the arts. And when we don't have something in our final approval that shows what we budgeted, we can't defend that to our constituents and to our community. So that's sort of what I'm holding on to as we're having these conversations.
And can I ask, we do have a sort of separate line for athletic activity funds, but then we're adding athletic money in the operational budget, right?
Right. We discussed that at the last meeting,
Yep.
and they met with the athletic staff and talked about the positions they needed in athletics.
Yep.
And that's why there's that increase, and it's a different fund than the one, there's two different athletic funds, right?
Yeah, and exactly, because it's a special fund as per the slide 2 of today's presentation. I'm just calling that out, that what we're putting in the operational budget is to enhance that. It's not the only budget there. And to Board Member Boze's point, the sort of roll-up of what we're spending on what, I think the pieces are here, but I just am having trouble with the overall budget.
So, so given that, and given when we have to submit a budget, is there time to get into those pieces between now and then? And then maybe we could give you clear direction as to what pieces we'd like to see.
Board Member Abeta, I think what we could do is get everything ready to enter everything as it stands now, and then be prepared that if anything were to change in between, if there's, if what I'm hearing is that you aren't able to make a final decision now and we have to put it off to like the 28th, is to maybe just have everything 99.9% ready to go, and if there's anything that comes out of that meeting that says, okay, we want to have you beef up this, then it's just, you know, a few of the lines that get touched rather than, you know, the majority are all ready to go. We could probably do something like that, just ready to push a button once we get the go. And if anything in those lines change, we just update that, and it's not entering everything, you know, with a day or two to do it.
Yeah, well, I guess I agree with Vice President Bozay. We do need some kind of these details about things that may have been cut, because you're right. We do then get approached, or we're told art was cut, or this specific program was cut, or that program was cut, and it would be helpful to know that. I mean, I get the big numbers, and certain things, salaries and benefits, they are what they are. You gave us the number of positions we have. But I think, yeah, there is some detail, and we probably have to do a better job as a board of telling you what detail we want and being clear. But yeah, I mean, an opportunity to say, well, what did you cut in this area when you guys put this budget together? Or what did you increase in a certain area when this budget? Because that's a great example, the art program or music program, and we don't get to that detail.
Well, and if things are being cut, is it just because of our enrollment numbers going down, or is it something else? And we need to be able to see that.
And maybe there's not, and maybe there hasn't been a lot of cuts.
But has there been cuts? I guess that's the question I have, is what has been cut?
I'm thankful that they're here to remind me that, you know, the budget meetings we had, we discussed what their needs are, and for the most part, unless it was something above and beyond what they needed to operate this year, that's when it went to that additional request, wish list. We pretty much, you know, went over what the operating costs for this year were, just automatically, if you will, or, well, unless it was reduced based on student participation. But it's pretty much the same as what it was last year, with the only differences being those additional items that we said, okay, above what you had to operate this year, the 4 dean of students are going to be extras on top of that, or the restorative justice. For the most part, though, everything else is pretty much in the baseline. We could, I think how we could demonstrate that, you know, so that, to give you that assurance, but basically that was part of all that budget meeting.
Go ahead, Board Member Blaya.
So, sorry, Board Member, do you want to go? Why don't you go ahead?
Did I say have the floor? I kind of rambled on and got out of, so I apologize, President Noble. So is it, you kind of started with all your departments with a flat budget, and then you added?
We didn't add automatically. We said, you know.
But those
we sent them a justification where we said, you know, how was this meet?
So you started with last year's budget, you said, and you probably used actuals. Here's what the actual, and so based on that, that's where we're going to start with each of you. And then if you want something in addition, you got to justify it, and if it's justified, we'll add it.
Can she speak to that?
Hi, good evening, President Noble, Vice President Bozay. I'm Regina Mascareñas, and I am the Director of Budget and Finance. And so, yes, Board Member Abeta, so what we do is we first go off of the 80 and 120-day average membership, because that is how we are funded through the SEG. So I did have every department and as well as every school site make a list of what's going to benefit their school. First of all, what they need, how is it going to benefit the school, how is it going to benefit the district, and how is it going to benefit our students? Because first of all, that's what we're all here to do is benefiting the students. So majority of every school submitted a written justification on how that was going to benefit. And then Dr. Griffin and Mr. Halford and a team went through those lists and identified what was going to be the most priority, and that was then presented. Correct, on slide 2, step 2. And then I did want to speak to Vice President Bozay. I work closely with every single department. So Christina Gonzalez, who is in charge of fine arts and music, goes through and she also budgets off of or allocates off of membership. So the only time we're ever decreasing anything is based on student enrollment. We are never taking anything away from the students, especially since it is something that is very beneficial to them. And as you've noticed, like the arts and music program is amazing. I do have a child that attends Milagro and is in the band program. So, definitely would not want to take away anything from any student. So I just want to, make that very clear as well. And I really do work closely with everyone to ensure that, we do have a solid budget going forward. So, but I definitely do understand your concerns about, wanting to look at everything, as a high level picture, and we can definitely get that to you, no problem whatsoever.
Thank you, President.
Thank you, Ms. Mascarenas. I appreciate that, and I want to call out, I know there's a lot of hard work and intention that goes into this, and some of what we end up hearing is exactly what Ms. Mascarenas pointed to, which is that when enrollment decreases, sometimes we do have cuts based on the numbers at school sites. So for example, we saw at our last presentation, a reduction, I think it was in counselor time because of, I believe, of the reduction in enrollment at El Camino Real, which is a very big school and that sort of thing. So sometimes these things line up for exactly that reason, that when the membership and the enrollment decreases, we do see decreases and cuts at school sites. And that doesn't tend to show up even in the roll-up, I think, that Vice President Bozay is talking about, but ultimately, it does give us the tools and the conversation to be able to look at the budget for the arts or athletics or music or counseling, librarians, nurses, all of these things that have been prioritized over the years by the board to understand in some fashion what the money is going for, what we're paying for, where we are needing to see the decreases because, again, of the declining enrollment picture. Go ahead, Board Member Blea.
Thank you, President Noble, and thank you for the background. And I do want to ask a couple of questions. First of all, I want to honor what Vice President Bozay is saying about staff salaries and things like that, and also what Mr. Halford said about the negotiation process. That's a work in progress still, right? So the question that I have is, even if we did delay a vote, what's today's date? Like the 14th or something like that? So today's the 14th. So that gives us 2 weeks to get negotiations done, to come up with the spending plan for cash balances, to maybe appropriate like a one-time payment. That doesn't feel like enough time. It feels like we'll be rushing, and that won't really work well. So, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say what I'm thinking is not that the details are hammered out, but that we might see some general buckets or timelines as to what we're doing and that sort of thing. I mean, I agree with you. We don't have the time to get it all done. But ultimately, I've heard the board ask a number of questions about if we could raise our minimum entry-level salary, if we could invest more in HR and investigate bringing the substitute thing in-house. And I heard from Mr. Granada tonight a really important piece about the fill rate that has gone up substantially since we brought in this contract, and so that's a key piece we need to consider. But ultimately, I think that there's a couple pieces here, which includes the roll-up that Vice President Bozé has talked about, and then ideally some coherence and sketch of a plan as to what we're doing next, how we're approaching things like cash. We know what's happening with negotiations. As Mr. Halford pointed out, we have seen this specter of cash sweeps before, but right now everybody is sitting on cash in all the governments, frankly, state, city, schools, and I think we need to. I know how to approach a lot of the theory and the revenue plus the cash and recurring and non-recurring, but what we need is something like a plan of what we're doing, when we're doing it, and how we're doing it, and not to mention, I think, a little more shape to the budget that we're being asked to approve. But go ahead.
So, I mean, I agree with you, but I don't think, and forgive me for saying this, but I don't think 2 weeks and 3 days before it's due is the time to come up with that big of a plan. And even if we got the information would be great, but it's not going to substantially change this budget, correct? So then by delaying a vote on the budget for informational purposes, we're not really accomplishing anything other than giving us some information. I do agree with you that, spending down the cash is really important, but I think for my questions that I've been asking, like, are we budgeted correctly to compete in a 5A district? My honest opinion is probably not, and I'm going to do some more research to prove my case, because my gut says we're not, but there's nothing we could do for this budget cycle. It's already been set. So my questions are more about how are we going to go from here to next year, because we're kind of where we're at. And Board Member Abate and I did meet with Nick, like we had talked about, and talked about the booster programs and about an equitable kind of distribution of those booster funds. And so is there any room for us to approve the budget so that staff could do what they need to do with like with some kind of like a notice that we need more information, because the numbers substantially are not going to change because we get the roll-up of information. So because the actual budget is not going to change substantially with that information, couldn't we just do something like that?
I mean, we can vote on anything, any motion anybody makes. Certainly what I would say is, I'm sitting here, I believe the board's due diligence is a certain level of accuracy and understanding on the budget, which I'm not real comfortable with tonight, and I will just say that. I think you're probably right, but I think this is a lot of money. It is our absolute authority and imperative to be clear in our approval and what we are doing with our budget. I don't think we're too far away. I think we went through a lot last week, and it was pretty good, and I felt a lot more comfortable last week. I am uncomfortable, just to say, and I think I'd like to ask the superintendent to weigh in, because ultimately this is her district. She's our leader here, and we need to, I think, hear from the superintendent what she'd suggest and would like to do. But there are a few pieces, and I think most of the questions have been answered one way or another. I'm a little uncomfortable with the kind of improvisational nature of the whole thing, but ultimately, I did hear the board ask for more investments in HR and how we're going to turn that around a couple weeks ago when we last met, and I did hear a request for some process and outline in terms of what we're going to do with the cash, and a few other things. And, frankly, I'd love candid answers if there just wasn't time or if we're not there or whatnot, but we are where we are. You're absolutely right. But we've been working on this for weeks. And right now, we have some, sort of close numbers in terms of what we might adopt that I think is slide 2 of tonight's thing, you know, I think, and even on the transportation, I think that's the money we reverted because, again, of declining membership, that we see the $200,000 drop in the transportation number. But, you know, given that we're clarifying numbers and, you know, looking at what the budget is, again, I'm uncomfortable here, and I want to say I think what Mr. Halford proposed in terms of starting to enter numbers is probably a good way to get a head start. But I'd like to hear the superintendent weigh in on an approach here, as ultimately this is sort of her budget.
Thank you, Board President Noble. Board members, my recommendation, if it would please the board, is for us to look at moving the May 28th board meeting to May 26th up to be able to bring a more clean line item roll-up as requested that can go into more specific details. I know that we have shared a lot of details over the course of 3 different meetings, and what I'm hearing is that you want it all summarized in one clean presentation.
Vice President Bozay, then Board Member Blea.
Thank you, President Noble. What Dr. Griffin just outlined sounds right to me. I do think we have heard a lot of this information. I don't think it would have to be reinventing the wheel. I think looking at the templates from previous years and just plugging in the numbers that you already know, so that we can see them all in one place. And again, this is us doing our due diligence, and I think it's an important part of transparency to be able to show all of that, to say, yes, we've looked, yes, we've seen, we've showed it to the public, and we can approve that budget.
Go ahead, Board Member Beta.
Board Member Beta.
Thank you. So, okay, yeah, I think that's a good plan, but again, I want to make sure you feel like you have clear direction before, so we're not here doing the same thing in 2 weeks. So HR, for example, your budget includes an increase of 450,000. So it'd be helpful to know, what does that pay for? Is it 4 FTs to do this, this, and this? 3, so break that down for us, or at least for me, because I think that would be helpful. As far as the cash reserve or the excess, when I had asked this question last week or the last time we met, I left with the feeling that we were going to deal with that after we approved the budget.
Right, so did I.
So if we're not, I'm hearing tonight, like maybe we want to do that next week. Did I hear you correctly, President Noble?
It was my impression that we had asked for I thought we'd asked for some sort of plan. And again, what we might think about spending down in FY27 in one-time expenditures. And
Okay,
truly,
good.
my thinking was we just put a number on that in terms of what might be reasonable. We don't have to say what those expenditures are.
Well, maybe I think that'd be helpful to
Well,
maybe what some of the ideas are for those expenditures.
Or at least that we can make a commitment that it's like, what's a reasonable amount in FY27 is, I'm going to pick a number, 5 million. And we think that some of those one-time expenditures might be X, Y, and Z, or we've talked about sort of innovative ideas and even some sort of process for school sites and school communities to propose the innovation that could build capacity for them. And again, we don't need all the details of that, but even to just sort of have that sketch, put it aside, and then agree in a clear timeline, as we have here tonight on the sub-plan. There is a clear timeline in the appendices here as to how we're going to do that work. And I would leave that to the superintendent and team to either come up with specifics, which I would be great with, and I thought we would have some tonight, or at least have a little bit of a sketch and allocation. And frankly, we can leave that outside of the FY27 budget, but just so, and bring it as a budget adjustment as we do it. You know, we have the authority to do that, but just so we have an idea and a plan for again, where we have the flexibility in the operational budget, and with some of the cash, and we know what some of the needs are, whether it's a mixer in a kitchen, whether it's an innovative project at a school, whether it's the schools of innovation, whether it's attendance contests, whether it's, so that we are intentionally addressing some of the issues or retention. I mean, we heard about that, retention, whatever, and some of that, needs to be discussed with the union, and I'm not sure, but this is honestly, again, sort of broad, and some of the things that we've worked on have come forward, but not a lot.
Do we want to give direction on how much cash reserve, like, don't go below 7%, don't go below 8%, even if we're just, would that be helpful? I mean, because you could bring us a plan that takes us back to 5% without us being clear about what.
And not only that, I'm sorry, I don't mean, to echo that, I think where I'm struggling is, I get it, we want to spend the cash balance down, and we want to improve HR, and we want to do all these things, but realistically speaking, next week is a killer week with graduations and with everything else going on. Next week is, and then the week after is like they have to enter into the budget, they have to get ready and close up the year and close everything out for the fiscal year. So realistically, operationally, I get where you're coming from, President Noble. I totally do, and I agree with you. But all the sub-presentations that we've had, like the athletic department came in and gave us a pretty good presentation. The arts department gave us a pretty good snapshot of how they're looking at and how they're appropriating things. So, and then because we do have the opportunities for budget adjustment requests, and because the negotiations are still in process, I would actually, rather than trying to delay and punt the budget approval down the road and say, let's hold off, I'd rather approve the budget and then look at opportunities down the road, maybe when we have our retreat, maybe when before that, where we could say, these are really, where we could really get into the details about what we see are some issues that we like. We want to improve HR, but what does that mean? Like, how do we want to improve HR? What's the measurables that we want to accomplish by improving HR? And what are the things that we'd like to see from a process perspective? What are like the one-time payments that we could use that would get back to the union, so that the union could take it back to their membership and say, hey, look, they want to do these two-time payments. So there's like a lot of moving pieces to all of this that I just don't think we're going to get, even with the roll-up information, done within the next week and a half. Because I can tell you that me personally, with the next week, with graduations and with parties and with, all that other stuff, it's going to be really hard to really wrap my head around anything, no matter what information we get. So I think we should, I believe that it's in our interest, or the board's interest, to approve the budget, understanding that there are some gaps in our understanding, and then perhaps fill those gaps down the road, and then use the BIR process to kind of cover those gaps. That's what I would like to see, rather than delaying a vote on the budget.
President Noble, to finish my thought, so when are union negotiations going to be completed? Will they be completed before the budget is done?
Board Member Abeyta, no, they will not be.
Okay, because that's going to impact the budget. We're approving a budget without knowing the bottom line for salaries and benefits. And usually what I'm familiar with is the board or the governing body sets aside a certain amount for union negotiations to accommodate that. And I don't think we've ever done that. And it sounds like the board wants to see us do better when it comes to salaries. So there's got to be, and that's a big part of the budget. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, we probably have to give some kind of guidance as to at least a cash reserve we would feel comfortable with, whether it's 9% or 7%. And then with the rest, I think we do have to talk about understanding that we're going to have to use some of that for the union negotiations, I think. Right?
Yes. Board Member Abate, I think what we could do, and this is kind of echoing what Board Member Bea said, is that because negotiations aren't going to be wrapped up, let's just say that if the result of negotiations are that we have to put so much more into salaries, we could bring that in July as a budget adjustment request. So you could see every step of the way. A bar could be seen as a mini budget, say, okay, here's the baseline you approved, and the salaries benefits were at 123 million. We're going to have to add 2 million to that because of negotiations. Here's what we're going to use. Maybe we put all of our cash in something very clear and say, we put it in restricted expenses, which I don't even know exactly what would fall under there. So it's a safe place to put it because we can't spend it on anything else. Then when we come and say, okay, we want to move 2 million out of this, where we put our cash, restricted expenses, to cover what we agreed to in negotiations. And it could be building off a baseline, which, as Regina had mentioned, does cover all the basics. And then you'll see each of the steps along the way in detail because, budget adjustment request has that. Another thing I wanted to mention, I kind of heard from both President Noble and Vice President Bose that I got the sense that everyone was somewhat comfortable with the budget, and so that's when I made the strategic decision to move on to the other funds. I said, I'm not going to spend their time going over something that they already seem to have an agreement for. So maybe that was a miscalculation on my part because nothing's changed in the last week I don't think would make anyone feel less comfortable if they were comfortable. And, I'm looking at the categories that was meant to show some kind of buckets. So you're not just saying, here's the budget, one line, and, no sense where it is. Maybe that should have been broken out into programs. Maybe that's something we need to do next year because I think it's always tricky when to start entering it all because it's such a monumental task that if you do it too early and you don't have any substantial agreement, well then, I'm saying, okay, Regina, all that work you did, wipe it out and here's the new numbers. So, there is that fine line and maybe we didn't quite capture it perfectly this time that, okay, now I think it's comfortable to move forward, to put it in and then we would have had a report to show you. But I think what you saw there would be enough to cover the basics and all the things that we have there. And if there is anything, because negotiations, are going to change some things and we will have to adjust it, but we'll let you know that through the bar process. And you'll even probably see it in more detail than you would had we just, had it all rolled into this one.
All right, thank you, President.
So I'm going to say I appreciate Dr. Griffin's suggestion. I think that's a good one. I mean, again, and I appreciate, Mr. Halford, your reflection in real time. I do think, this is, I mean, I just had my part of the reason I wasn't here for the initial 2 meetings was because we were just approving my operational budget at my nonprofit for the nonprofit board. And that is, needing to make the board members comfortable. This is a different dance. This is a dance with the public, with our vested authority as elected officials for oversight. And, there's a certain level of specificity. And again, I appreciate what Mr. Halford said. I do think, in previous years, we've done a lot of different presentations in a lot of different ways with a lot of different level of details. To my knowledge, we've never really looked at the chart of accounts. Maybe that goes way back in terms of doing that. But ultimately, having some clarity in the numbers, consistency about what we're doing, and completeness in what the budget is that we're adopting for the Santa Fe Public Schools, I do feel is important for transparency and for having and breeding confidence in the process. I do, you know, my recollection, which may be different from others, but is that, and I don't want, is that we were, initially it seemed as if negotiations might be concluded by the time we got to our last meeting, and there may have been delays, there have been any number of things happening. The world is wild right now, I get it. It would be, to me, preferable if we had that done. What I thought we have done, and I appreciate where you're going, Board Member Abeyta, is I thought we had asked for recommendations on what to do with the cash. What I heard last time was a 2-year spend down to get us to at least the 7.5% that's in the policy. What I hear you saying is, I think, the right thing, that given that we don't have a recommendation, and if we're asking for this, we might need to establish some parameters. And I think that that is also right. I again, and we're piecing this together, I heard us ask for more on HR in addition to the $450 that is additional money into HR. I recall that we did get some decent answers on the positions that those things would pay for from the HR director last week, but I appreciate, and again, where you are, Board Member Abeyta, because I recall some of those things, but I would love to see them enumerated, sort of, okay, we're spending an additional $450,000 on that, what are we getting? And like I say, I think I remember 3 positions that Jeanette went through and that sort of thing. But I do think, for me, I don't feel comfortable without a certain level of clarity for what we're passing in the budget, what is the right number in the operational budget, what we're seeing and suggesting that we would put in and pull out of cash, and ideally some reflection of the programmatic budget that we're seeing. So, you know, the Tuesday that the superintendent suggested is the day after Memorial Day. I know that it's a crazy week, but I also just simply don't believe that because we're busy, that we don't do our due diligence and our duty and maintain transparency in the way that I feel we need to. So, you know, I have a strong preference that we do work to set the parameters that we need to. Again, I thought, and I always prefer, I will just say, I always prefer a recommendation from staff as to what is reasonable in terms of a spend down plan, what cash we might do for 1 year and 2, and again, even if it's in sort of broad strokes. But if we want to set some parameters and give direction tonight, I think that is the right thing. Vice President Bozé.
Thank you, President Noble. I just want to clarify that I have been comfortable with the process that we've gone through and the numbers that I've seen. I made an assumption that this would be, and again, like this slide number 2 is part of what we've seen in our budget roll-up. It's kind of the last page, because we go through a roll-up of the operational and then we see the operating, everything together at the end. So I just made an assumption that we were going to kind of have a comprehensive presentation of everything so far, plugged into those kinds of spreadsheets as we have in past years. So it's not that I haven't been comfortable with anything as we've gone through this process. I just expected something different tonight, that's all.
Board Member Blea.
So I could see where, like, an assumption and all that, but we didn't have an agreement, right? We never talked to staff and said we wanted to do X, Y, Z, we wanted to see this, we never did this. And so because we never said we wanted to see a roll-up, because I personally have never done this before, obviously, so the numbers that I'm seeing, I've been completely comfortable with. I had the opportunity to meet with Superintendent and Mr. Halford, and I was comfortable then too. So I've been very comfortable with the budget process. I think staff has been very transparent about what they've done. I think where there's been a lot of expectations without agreements, and I think that's kind of what we ran into with the contract as well, is that there's expectations without agreements. And whatever we decide tonight, I think going forward, we have to work better on agreements instead of just stating expectations, because we're coming up against the wire again, and it just feels a little reactive, and I just would prefer not to be reactive in these kinds of settings. So that's kind of how I feel.
President Noble, so what I think I'm hearing then is the numbers aren't going to change. That's fine, but we want to know we want a little more details to what makes up those numbers. Like if we go back to the other presentation with the steps, for example, then again, the step threes for each of those items on the very left-hand column, again, going back to, okay, this much is making up salaries, so this is how many employees, this is, because usually in a budget you can see, and I know it's probably a lot more detail than, some people are comfortable with, but here's that number, and all these 3 pages, if you add them all up, and all the positions and everything, that's how we're getting to whatever the millions are in that category. Then the next one, which is, I forget what it is because it's not in front of me right now, is a certain amount, and here's all the FTEs, here's all this, and that's how we got to that. And if we do that for each one, then we might see some, and some budgets even have what that looked like compared to last year or compared to actuals, and then it's incumbent upon us to say, oh, can you explain to me this change in this item here under this category? Why did it go up or why did it go down? And then you give us the explanation. I guess that's what we're saying we want, right? Because I'm not clear either.
President Noble, thank you. So I'll just be super clear for myself. What I would like is a version of the budget roll-ups that we've had in previous years. I don't really feel like I need to see that 3-step process again. We use that tonight so that we would have something to look at as far as how we got to those numbers. But that's what I'm looking for, which is operational, broken down with greater detail before we get to this current screen that we're looking at now that shows the whole picture.
So if they got last year's presentations and just plugged in these numbers to it, that should be good enough.
That would be good for me.
Okay, thank you.
I don't remember last year's specifically versus years before. I do think looking, and I think there probably has been some looking at previous presentations. I would say I agree with Vice President Bozé. I think we need a little bit of a slide that we had, maybe on that 3rd-step slide of what's in the operational budget. I do think, frankly, if this budget here, I think we're also being asked to budget cash for non-recurring things that's not in this slide. So, I do think we need a slide that is sort of the complete budget picture. And if, the operational budget has changed by $59,000 or whatever it is, that's fine. But what's in the operational budget, I think, needs to be included. I think, a greater level of detail. And I think we have to, per what Mr. Halford said, we have to budget the cash if we're planning to spend the cash. So we need that in our budget, and so we need something that is a budget with a bow on top. And I do want to say, just partly because I think there's sort of some implications here, I'm not uncomfortable with any transparency from staff or anything like that. What I'm saying is the transparency is what we owe to the public, and that's what feels important to me. And I do think I agree with Board Member Blea, if it wasn't clear, which again, I will just own that I thought it was, that there was going to be some plan for cash and some answer to the HR request of more. That's okay. I just, there's been really good, and I know there's been great effort here, work to answer a lot of board member questions, but those are two key pieces that, to my mind, we did agree at our last budget discussion, and, we've answered a lot of them tonight. I think Board Member Vice President Bozay has pointed a clear picture as to what we can do. And again, I just want to add to that we need to budget the cash. And what I would say is, if there's agreement on this board, I would like to ask for some thought, which it doesn't have to be in the budget, but about what we are going to do around working with our cash balance and thinking about, and Superintendent, this is your opportunity to tell me if you're uncomfortable with this, because I'm trying to be very clear that I am asking for some substance and recommendations about how we approach that cash and the one-time spending.
Board President Noble, board members, I am not uncomfortable with that. We have 2.4 million that we've already looked at budgeting out of the cash reserve. Plus, we have initiatives that we're looking at, including a math adoption that we need to be able to pay for some professional development this summer. So we have ideas on how the spending will happen with the cash, and am happy to bring some of our plans for those initiatives.
Go ahead.
Thank you, President Noble. I think that point about the cash is really important. And again, I think seeing revenue versus, expenses kind of next to each other is I think it's on those budget roll-ups. So that's sort of what I'm remembering. And just whether it was last year's or past years, that's what I'm envisioning in my head.
And if I could ask a clarifying question, Board Member Abate, part of the HR, I do remember you mentioning to beef that up some. My interpretation was that was in response to taking over possibly the subcontract, which is kind of why we thought, when we do the work next year, it would eventually, when we know exactly how many we would need and so forth. Is there some other areas you wanted addressed as well, not just were the changes in HR specific to the subcontract, or was it in addition to that? There's some other things you would like to see.
President Noble, last week we had before we got into the substitute contract, you were increasing the HR budget, and I was comfortable with that. But then when we got into the contract, I was thinking we need to add even more into HR to prepare for that. Because if we already are kind of operating at a deficit in HR when it comes to staff and what we're trying to do, and then we last week put an even bigger one on you because we said, oh yeah, now we want you to address the substitute situation, and we want to cancel this contract in 9 months. So I was expecting a little more money to go into the HR budget to address that, unless you think what you put in originally can cover both. But I just thought, well, if the original budget was increasing this much, now we just gave you another task that's going to take more bodies really, or cash. We need to increase that a little more.
And I think the point of the timeline was to say that, at some point we're going to beef it up if we decide to. And we'll know at that time what exactly. But what we could do is just say, okay, we're going to assume it'll be 3 FTE, and the average cost of those would be so much, and just have it in there. If it turns out to be we don't need as much, or we decide to go in a different direction, we could always change at that point. But at least then you'll see maybe like at the highest possible cost it could be, or something. We could work it in the forefront. The idea was that we would, study it and then add it at a later date and say, as to your point, here's the money we're going to add for these. But we could certainly figure it out now and add it, and then maybe give like a separate breakdown instead of just having on the slide, here's the HR initiative and here's exactly what it, the number of FTE and quoting those and provide that kind of as almost as its own separate budget, if you will.
Right.
And
Thank you.
Just on that point, I want to say, Board Member Beta, what you just described is exactly how I remember it. And, so to the point of agreements, that's what I thought. And again, I think we've sort of indirectly said, maybe not this year, but, to my mind, again, this is, as we follow the lines through of clear direction, that we talked about the contract and then we said, maybe we need to beef up HR. And so to answer what I think was a very clear agreement, it sounds like to me, is saying, we're in the contract for the year. There's actually a pretty good fill rate compared to what there was before. We can look at additional needs for HR, but at this time, nothing was recommended. But just to say, Superintendent, I think it would be very helpful if we get to those clear moments to then, and again, I know I want to acknowledge there's been a lot of good answering board questions, but this one, what I just said, is pieced together. And there was no additional money or anything brought forward in HR. So again, the assumption is, okay, not at this point. That is not the recommendation from staff to add more than the $450,000 into the budget, which again is fine.
And that is fine, but we were clear, we do not want this contract next year. We want to terminate it in March.
Yep.
So if you can do it with this amount, then yes, by all means, do it. But again, and I echo and feel the frustration that Vice President Bose expressed two weeks ago. We've been very concerned about this contract, and we want to give them notice in March, because that's the 90 days, and we want to do something different. And if you don't need extra money right now in this budget to do that, then yeah, that's fine. We don't need that, but we don't want this contract again next year.
Thank you, Board President. Board Member Abeta, I appreciate, I did review your direction at the last board meeting, looking at the contract and some of the clauses in the contract. We were very intentional not to add employees at this time in order to help that transition, but what we did provide to you was a plan for moving forward with following up with the board in January through March with what the next steps will be for bringing this in-house.
Okay, thank you.
President Noble?
Go ahead.
Thank you, President Noble. So I think, but what you just said, like, that's really good context. And had we had that context on the slide with the thing, like, we're looking to say, oh, we heard your request, and with your context that you just provided probably could have solved a lot of the confusion. So maybe in the future, giving the context about how it's going to address the actual request, because I think that could have saved some of the discussion.
Okay, so are we good with, go ahead, Vice President Bose.
Thank you, President Noble. I have a lot more to say about ESS. It's not going to be tonight, but I do just want to note that I've had a lot of time to collect my thoughts since our last meeting, and it isn't relevant to the discussion that we're having tonight, but I will be saying more things and asking lots of questions.
Go ahead, Board Member Blaya.
Thank you, President Noble. Vice President Bose, I would really love to hear those questions. When would we have an opportunity to hear those?
I sort of actually think it maybe should be an agenda item, so I might just ask that it be put on for a future meeting.
Good. Are we okay with what the superintendent suggested, coming back on Tuesday, I think it was the 26th, you said? And doing, that would mean, I think, and we're not on advanced planning yet, but basically moving our board meeting for that week to the 26th. And I think I want to, go ahead.
I had something on the 26th, so I'm just wondering why we needed to move 2 days.
I think the idea was to give the team more time to upload the budget once it's
it's finalized. And I do think that, you know, everything we've talked about, there is a decent amount of comfort substantially with the numbers as they stand, but ultimately adopting a final budget, and I think, you know, ideally we wouldn't get to the situation that Mr. Halford outlined where Ms. Mascarenes has put it all in and then has to change it all. But ultimately, that was the reason, I think, was to get a little more time for adoption of the final budget before. Go ahead, Board Member Blaya.
I'd like to hear from staff if moving it would, if we could keep it the 28th, would there be any benefit to the 2 days?
So if I may, we heard from the superintendent, and I don't want to, you know, I think that we can ask, but truly, the appropriate protocol is for the board to ask questions of the superintendent and the superintendent to tap staff as needed. And so, you know, we can certainly give that opportunity, but it is actually a little bit of an important governance line.
Okay, so Superintendent, could I ask you, would 2 days really give us that benefit of any kind of motion? If they're going to already enter it, would 2 days matter? Since we're not going to have Dr. Gonzalez there on the 26th, I would prefer to keep it on the 28th because of rhythm and because of scheduling and because of everything else. This month is just a very difficult month, and so would we benefit by having those 2 days?
Thank you, Board Member Blaya. I think we would benefit from having those 2 days because if the board comes back with any more questions, we'll need those 2 days to be able to come back on the 28th.
Come back on the 28th? So is it an additional meeting?
We're moving the meeting from the 28th to the 26th. But if there's an issue, we would still have the availability. We'd have 2 more days to continue to work on this after the 26th.
But we wouldn't have a public opportunity to answer those questions.
And we wouldn't be able to notice a meeting in 48 hours.
There's just no way.
Well, we'd have to notice them both now tonight, basically.
Right, we'd have to add a meeting. That's what we're doing.
Yes, we would have to add a meeting and we would have to have agendas and then we could cancel it. That we could do.
Well, and FYI, I'm out of town the 28th, so either way, someone's not gonna be here. But I feel comfortable. I leave the 27th, so I'd have to, but I feel comfortable with the budget being approved after all this discussion on either the 28th or the 26th. I don't have to be here for that.
Dr. Gonzalez, I guess I feel I have to ask, is there any chance you could be here on the 26th, change plans? Not really.
Well, it'll be hard, but I will do it.
Okay.
My preference.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. So it does sound to me like we could do the 26th, and maybe we can do it quickly.
Is there a time that
Would be better for you? That's a good question. Not necessarily. Okay.
So, just one more question about that 26th meeting. Would it be a normal meeting, or would it just be to do this? Or could we add an agenda item to the 26th? Because I do want to add an agenda. I'm hoping I could add an agenda. I would like to ask an agenda item for that next meeting. It's just, if we're only going to do budget, and it's going to be a quick meeting, then is there opportunity for that?
I think at this stage, what we're talking about is really, and we might want to cover our bases and notice too, but really is moving the meeting currently scheduled for the 28th to the 26th, where we would, I would say, substantially do budget, but yes, we could add something else to the agenda, certainly. Right? Yes. Okay. Superintendent agrees with that. Okay. We good going forward with that? All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, team, for all your work on this, and we appreciate the effort to give us the clarity and get us over the finish line. I do think that there's a lot here, and we just need to tie it up. My hope is, Dr. Gonzalez, we can get you out in a reasonable time that evening and hopefully go quickly. All right, we good to move on? Because we've still got another budget to do. We're moving on to our action items, where we will start with the budget for the Academy for Technology and the Classics, FY 26-27. I assume, Mr. Halford, are you taking the lead on this as well?
Yeah. Yes, Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Griffin. So what I did is I asked Beverly, our deputy CFO, to dust off her role at PD back when we would review these budgets, and we put together this template that would look at some of the key areas of the ATC budget, like what percent of the is in salaries, the revenues, and cash balance. Everything looked good. We did raise some concerns. The cash balance was a bit low. It's 1.5% or so. As Beverly noted, though, PD may have some requirements from them. Anything below 5%, they may ask for some money to be put into some emergency reserve as a safeguard, and I believe that was communicated to the school, so they're aware of that potential, and they're also aware of our concerns that how low it is. I do know that there will be a change at the school as far as who's handling the finances. They're contracting it out. We were already planning on meeting with them, just to kind of introduce ourselves and let them know that we are here for their to support, for any assistance they may require, and so we would have extended that offer one way or the other, but now with a new firm coming in to do the budget, I think it's even more critical. But I think nothing that we saw would cause us to recommend disapproval. I think it's with that address, a concern addressed, I think we're ready to recommend approval.
Thank you. Can I invite folks from ATC up if you want to tell us a little bit about your budget?
Sure. President Noble, Vice President Jose, Superintendent Griffin. My name is Jennifer Ferguson. I'm one of the interim co-principals. This is Ms. Biscamp, the other co-principal. We did do all the mandated raises, the 1% raise for educators and staff, the increase in insurance premiums for medical of 9.95%, the dental insurance increase, the NMIPSIA increase at 7%, and then, of course, the required 80/20 NMIPSIA increase as well. We took over about 4 weeks ago, and so in going through this budget, we agreed with Mr. Halford in the low cash reserve and made some adjustments moving forward into next year, going a little bit on the conservative side, but also reassessing our programming, reassessing our number of staff. We did reduce staff for next year, particularly in administrative positions, in order to retain our commitment to student instruction, but also knowing that we need to beef up our cash reserves. We are anticipating with those the cost savings of reducing the FTE for next year of recouping about $260,140 in operational, which brings us back up to about 5.3% of our budget in reserve.
Thank you. Go ahead, Board Member Blaya.
So I've heard like a ton of stuff from constituents about ATC, just different things that are going on or whatever, just stuff. But it leads to the question, why are you contracting out budgeting and all that stuff instead of keeping it in-house?
I'm sorry, what is the contracting?
They're contracting out their financial stuff, which is why I find,
Got it.
got it, okay.
It's part of our reduction in FTE for administration. It also addresses some of the issues that we found budgetarily to go with a different firm, or to go with a firm instead of our in-house.
Yep, Vice President Bose.
Thank you, President Noble. This is just like understanding the spreadsheet layout. Can you tell me the difference between the estimated amounts and estimated FTE versus the projected amount and projected FTE?
Yeah, so the estimated amount is the amount from the 25-26 budget.
Okay.
And then the projected amount is the 26-27.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I wondered if there were dates that maybe just didn't carry over on the printout. Thank you.
Other questions? If not, is there a motion?
I move approval of the Academy for Technology and the Classics 26-27 budget.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your support.
Good luck next year. Moving on to Fine Arts Education Act, FAEA, application renewal. Superintendent, will you speak to this?
Deputy Romero?
President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Griffin, I ask Dr. Christina Gonzalez to come up and speak regarding the funding. It is for K-6 students at all of our elementaries and K-8s, but she can talk about the specifics about what she plans to do with the funds.
I love it when I get an honorary doctorate at 8:30 at night. Bring it on. So the FAEA, the Fine Arts Education Act, we submit every year to an NMPED, and it provides funding for K-6 arts education. The LEA has the authority how those funds are spent, and in this district, we put it towards art and music, a lot of what you hear and what you see in board meetings every month. We also put it towards FTE, professional development. There are a wide range of initiatives under the department.
Thank you very much. And it says on our sheet K-6.
Correct.
Appreciate that, and thank you for lighting up our board meetings so very often. Questions from the board?
President Noble, no question. I was just going to move for approval of the Fine Arts Education Act application renewal.
I'll second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to what is an invitation to bid for miscellaneous construction tools, supplies, and hardware. Any questions? Any thoughts? An invitation to bid for miscellaneous construction tools, supplies, and hardware advertised in newspapers. 5 bids were received. The bids were reviewed. And a determination. So it's still an invitation to bid? Can we clarify here what's going on? The bids were reviewed and a determination was made to award multiple vendors, is what it says. Oh. Anybody want to clarify for us what?
So we are seeking your approval to award with these vendors that are listed.
Okay. Big Joe, Wind Supply of Santa Fe, Boone and Boone Supply, Summit Electrical Supply, Territorial Key, and Lock and Safe.
Correct.
President Noble.
Yes.
And so is this just kind of like they're on an approved list after we do this? So as you need different supplies throughout the year, you can access any one of these, and we're not giving it to just like Big Joe. What if Big Joe doesn't have what we
Exactly.
need? Then we could go to Win Supply or Boone and Boone and Summit.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And so just procedurally, what we're approving is not an invitation to bid. What we're approving is the contractors that contracts will then be brought forward for.
Correct.
Okay. And the point of the typo was it wasn't a proposal. We're approving the result of the invitation to bid.
Right.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
I'll second. Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to proposal number 11, General 2025-2026 Audit Services District-Wide. Mr. Halford.
Thank you, President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Griffin. We had a subcommittee, if you will, of the audit committee meet and go over. We received 3 proposals for audit services. We decided that there was 3 of the 4 individuals had the one that were making the recommendation as their top choice, and overall the scoring indicated that they were indeed the one that had the overall highest score, so that they are the ones that we are moving forward with the request for approval.
Thank you very much. And you did have the 2 members from the audit committee on the selection?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank
Carl,
you.
yeah.
Any questions from the board? I'll go ahead and move approval of proposal number 11, Audit Services District-Wide.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Motion carries. Okay, now we move on to our consent agenda. Any questions, or anything to be considered separately? Vice President Bozay.
Thank you, President Noble. It doesn't need to be considered separately, but I do just want to point out on the contracts over $60,000, the 4th item down there is remove existing track and field and replace it with synthetic turf and new running track at Santa Fe High School. I think we all saw that kind of sad article from early April about lack of track meets in the city and dilapidated track and field facilities. So I'm pleased to see that moving forward and looking ahead to more track meets next spring. Yay.
Woo-hoo. So,
I will move approval of the consent agenda unless other people have things.
I thought you might.
No, it's not, and me
Approval. Anyway, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or otherwise? Okay, we've approved the consent agenda. And this may have been a little bit of a miscommunication. We can do this now if we want to. I'd be inclined to say nope. But ultimately, as we see, the next item on our agenda is basically who we would nominate to the audit committee, to the CRC, to the PI board, and to the statewide New Mexico School Board Association. And then actually, we can. I mean, I think we should discuss it, and I think the suggestion is that we do this at another meeting, not at this one, to think about who wants to be on CRC and chair, and who wants to be on audit and chair, and then who wants to be at NMSA and PI boards. But I believe, and that's my mistake for having it on there, but we were going to put
item B on, I believe, so that you, Dr. Gonzalez, could nominate your CRC member? Is that correct?
No.
Audit, okay.
So I want to nominate Joanne Johnson to be on the audit committee, and she currently works for the New Mexico Finance Authority. So she's a good person to be on that committee.
I will second that, if that's a
Okay.
motion. Let's do it.
Okay, and just to check, is there anything else anybody else wants to do in terms of CRC or audit nominations at this time?
Are the people we appointed, are their terms expiring? I wasn't clear
At the
on
end
that.
of the fiscal year, we need to
June.
reappoint them,
Before the
yes,
end of June.
before the end
Okay.
of June, or in July, because those don't practically. But yeah, this was in part because Dr. Gonzalez had a member of the audit committee. We do have members that we put it on, and we put it on in a fulsome way, which it's a little early for that. Go
So,
ahead.
but we have to be prepared to reappoint our people by when, just so that I can talk to them between now and then and make sure they still want to serve.
We will it looks like a meeting is scheduled for June 11th.
Okay.
And then we have another one scheduled for June 25th. So ideally, we would, and we can keep this on the agenda, we would talk
Okay.
to our people and do our nominations before the end of June.
So if I'm ready by the 11th, it'll be on here and we can do that on the 11th.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Board Member Blaya.
So I don't have anything about any of this, but I wasn't sure if it was a board announcement. I just want to say something real quick about the.
We have a motion and a
Oh, there's a
second.
motion. Oh, sorry, I
Yep.
forgot one. Second, we'll vote.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to nominate Ms. Johnson to the Audit Committee. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Okay, please go ahead.
So just real quick, I really have to call out, I feel very compelled to call out the student council at White Tigers Elementary. I have to do this because they came up with the process to rename their school that rivaled anything I've ever seen in Adultlandia. And I have to say that whatever the votes, the chips and all that stuff, whatever their fishbowl vote, all that whole process, that is going to have heavily weight in my eyes because that was such a good process. That student council did such a great job. I mean, that was like a thing that I saw. I couldn't even believe it. So kudos to staff for putting that together, or training, or whatever they did. If they came up on their own, it was absolutely brilliant. So I just wanted to call that out.
Thank you for saying that. That is beautiful to hear and a nice thing to end on. Any other board discussion and possible action? Okay, moving on to advanced planning. We have graduations, and I believe we've all received calendar invites for the times for those. We have a CRC meeting that is.
We do not.
No.
Not there on advanced planning, so the May 20th CRC meeting is not a thing. And we are now scheduled for May 26th for a meeting at, should we say 5:30? Dr. Gonzalez, do you want us to start at 5? You really don't care? Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody else care? All right, in which case we'll go with 5:30 as scheduled. Anything else on advanced planning?
We had discussed not having the June 25th board meeting as well. I'm sorry that's made it onto this agenda.
Okay. Well, that we can always cancel.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to our student board member. You stayed here all night long, and we appreciate you. Okay, we are adjourned.